UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon announces a possible political breakthrough in Burundi. Malawians fear the return of leprosy as the number of cases rises. And the Obamas fulfill a 106-year-old's dream. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. We begin our broadcast with a developing story out of the United States. The U.S. Defense Department is submitting a plan Tuesday to close the controversial Guantanamo Bay Cuba Detention Center. The notorious facility has housed hundreds of militant fighters captured after the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks. President Barack Obama pledged to close the facility shortly after assuming office in 2009. A short time ago, Mr. Obama spoke about the proposed plan.
When it becomes clear that something is not working as intended, when it does not advance our security, we have to change course. For many years, it's been clear that the detention facility at Guantanamo Bay does not advance our national security. It undermines it. This is not just my opinion. This is the opinion of experts. This is the opinion of many in our military. It's counterproductive to our fight against terrorists because they use it as propaganda in their efforts to recruit.
Well, the Pentagon plans call for completion of the shutdown within 90 days, but with Congress opposed, it sets up a battle over what to do with the 90-plus hundreds of detainees still housed there. Among the options are sending some of the prisoners back or to other third countries, while the rest could be relocated to maximum security prisons here in the United States. Now, Pentagon officials have already prepared options for relocating those detainees deemed too dangerous to be released, including civilian and military sites in Colorado, Kansas, and South Carolina. The United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon is in Africa and says Burundian President Pierre Nkurunziza has agreed to begin talks with opposition leaders to bring an end to a nearly year-long political crisis. Mr. Ban arrived in Bujumbura late Monday and Tuesday. He announced the breakthrough following meetings with politicians and civil society groups. The UN chief says that all sides are promising to engage in inclusive dialogue. His visit comes 1 month after a UN Security Council delegation visited the country to press for negotiations among Nkurunziza and his opponents. Burundi has been mired in a sometimes violent political crisis since April of last year, when President Nkurunziza won what is widely viewed as an unconstitutional third term. Well, for more on the Secretary General's effort to broker a peace deal, reporter Moses Havyarimana joins us on the phone from Bujumbura with some late-breaking developments. Good evening, Moses.
Good evening.
Yes, now we hear that there is an agreement that the Burundian president will actually release some political detainees. Tell us about that.
Yes, actually, this came early today in the morning in Bujumbura after the meeting of the President Pierre Nkurunziza with the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon when he announced that he is ready to release 2,000 detainees from the prison. Remember that this is not the first time the president has done this. Earlier last year, he also released more than 100 also prisoners from former protesters who were protesting against him last year, against his third term. So we see that many residents here are having a hope that actually their relatives could be released and it could be given a glimmer of hope in the calming down the tension which has been here in Bujumbura this last year.
Now, Moses, we know that recently there was a UN Security Council visit there, but it didn't seem to have achieved a lot. What has changed this time? Does it look like things are looking better than last time?
Yes, it proved to be a little bit different because what we saw last night is the UN Secretary General met some opposition political leaders, and one of them was the political party leader of IPRONA, which wasn't recognized by the government, which was critical of the government, and the government wasn't able to recognize it. So the government made a move and they called that political party to come and meet Ban Ki-moon in order to resolve the political crisis which has been rocking the country since last year So it's a little bit a change of we can look at the change on how the representatives of the political parties have been in. However, there are still those who are outside the country who would like to engage in the inclusive dialogue in order to put an end to the crisis, which is still a big question for the government, if it will engage them with it in the dialogue.
Yes, and what has been the reaction in Bujumbura?
Well, Bujumbura, they have been delighted, first of all, by the announcement of the release of the 2,000 detainees, and they have welcomed the decision by the president. And remember that the UN Secretary General back in Month said that he urged the Burundian government to engage in inclusive dialogue. So this seems like the cancellation also. Also, the Brennan government had to cancel the arrest warrant of some individuals earlier last week, which proves to be a move, a big step forward in bringing back the stakeholders for an inclusive dialogue in order to resolve the current crisis which is our situation.
How do you describe the situation? Is it calm now since the last few days?
Well, it has been relatively calm, but we have seen grenade attacks here and there. Even yesterday, during the Ban Ki-moon visit, there have been grenade attacks and shootings, and according to the police spokesman, he said 2 people have been killed in these grenade attacks, and at least 17 people have been wounded. So we have seen these grenade attacks going on and on in the capital, while most of the innocent civilians have lost their lives during these attacks. And the Burundi government has taken measures also of stopping the motorbikes in entering into the capital, saying that these could actually probably decline the new wave of the grenade attacks on the motorbike.
Moses, thank you very much. Moses Havyarimana reporting from Bujumbura in Burundi. Well, now to the European migrant crisis. Police in Greece have begun removing hundreds of migrants from a camp at the country's border with Macedonia. The migrants, most of them from Afghanistan, were loaded on buses bound for Athens early Tuesday, where they will be housed in an army-built camp. One migrant spoke about his frustration with how he is being treated.
Good. Why they are coming over here? Why they are surrounding us? This is not good. This is against human values. You're here, asylum seeker. We apply for the asylum. Let us go. Why they stop us over here?
Now, thousands of migrants have been encamped in Idomeni since Macedonia imposed tighter restrictions on migrants seeking to enter the country. The deadlock along the Greek-Macedonian border is part of the biggest refugee crisis to plague Europe since World War II. More than 1 million migrants and refugees fleeing war and poverty in Iraq, Syria and elsewhere arrived in 2015, many of them traveling from Turkey to nearby Greece. Well, as Liberia enters its post-Ebola recovery phase, millions of people still suffer from the economic instability created by the epidemic. The instability affects mostly women and youth. On his recent trip to Liberia, VOA's Jackson Vunganyi visited a women's training center that empowers women by teaching them how to design and sew while providing employment opportunities for them.
Reports show that across Africa, unemployment affects women and girls the hardest. In some post-conflict countries like Liberia, the economy and high levels of gender discrimination make it hard for women to find meaningful employment to support their families. Other reports show that women are often victims of intergenerational poverty, a cycle that is compounded by high rates of illiteracy. Many who lack the skills and resources have resorted to selling crafts and food on the streets. It is this entrepreneurial spirit that inspired Alfreda Mason, a social entrepreneur and designer, to create Jola House. It's a training program that helps women in Liberia gain skills to become entrepreneurs and to drive economic development in their communities.
Well, my inspiration was very simple. I left here during the coup in my late teens, and I lived in the U.S. for many years, where I have my family, my husband, and my kids. And we brought our kids home for a visit. And I just decided there was just so much devastation and so much to do. I decided that I was going to come back after my son went to school and see what I can do to help my country.
The students at Jola House are given extensive training and work opportunities to design and create items that are both functional and decorative. Most of their clothing and accessories are sold in the U.S. market.
These are apron. Yes.
Nice. So these are the bangles.
Yeah, bangles for the hand.
The necklaces.
These are necklaces.
I usually reach out to girls between 17 and 25. Most of them are mothers, single mothers. Most of them are either high school dropout or they are in high school but in low grades. So right here we have one of the students putting patches together. We decided to do the patches because when we sold the bags, we have a lot of extra fabric that we're burning. And then we decided instead of burning this fabric, what is the best use for them? So we decided to use this patch, meaning just putting different kinds of fabrics together and making patch. And then when we put the patch together, we'll make our quilts out of them and also use it as decorative item for our bags.
Mason says that the Jola House program gives the young women options to either work independently as designers or work together in a cooperative.
And for the first 2 years, our focus was on training and development. And after we train, we're trying to just not train and let these women go back to their homes, but wanted to train and develop some kind of enterprising. We provide the material, and then you can produce the product, and we buy the product back from you. And then that price we pay is like a living wage. Or you can go ahead and form a business. So we kind of recommend our girls to microcredit and help them with their filling up the forms, help them to have some kind of guarantee fund that when they go out there to get on their own, they will have some kind of startup funds.
Liberia's civil war ended in 2003. Its post-conflict phase was disrupted by an Ebola epidemic that killed thousands of its people. Mrs. Mason says that women are often affected at disproportionate rates, and that's why she started Jola House as a way to reduce the economic inequality of women. Alice Clemens is the administrator at Jola House. She was part of the second class to graduate from the program.
Before I started work with Jola House, I had a lot of challenges. I would face a lot of difficulties, but when I met Mrs. Mason and we talked, she told me about Jola House. I had interest in Jola House when I came and got employed. I started work, and I'm so grateful to God that things are okay.
The market for Jola House products was greatly affected by the recent Ebola epidemic. The majority of her clientele were tourists and expats. They don't come as much anymore. But she hopes that with more of her products reaching the U.S. market, Jola House can increase their revenue and continue to help more women. For Voice of America, I'm Jackson Bunganyi.
We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. All coming up, an outbreak of an ancient disease in Malawi has officials concerned. Stay with us.
This is Green Beat for a healthier planet.
Believe it or not, electric cars are not a new idea. The first Porsche car was powered by a battery more than 100 years ago. Still, electric plug-in car sales are far below those of carbon-fueled vehicles. Ron Coltonbow is president of the Washington chapter of the Electric Auto Association.
People really want a vehicle that they want to be able to just hit the open road and go as far as they want to go when they don't do that very often. It's a combination of range, price, and charging infrastructure. But all three of those things are improving, year by year.
The biggest electric vehicle improvement, says Coltonbow, will be for range and price.
The next 2 years is going to be a turning point because there are at least 3 or 4 vehicles that are going to get in that 200-mile range in that mid-30s price point. So that's going to really open some people's eyes.
Out of the more than 17 million cars sold last year in the United States, less than 3% were electric or hybrids. The average range of an electric car motor is currently about 120 kilometers. I'm Rebecca Ward for VOA's Green Beat.
Newborns with birth defects caused by the Zika virus are getting global attention. According to Brazil's health ministry, thousands of cases of microcephaly, a serious birth defect characterized by smaller than average head and incomplete brain development, have been reported. Pregnant women should take extra precautions and be aware of the risks. The CDC recommends that all pregnant women consider postponing travel to Zika-impacted areas. Learn the facts about Zika. Education is your first line of defense.
Well, it's time for our health reporter, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu with some new information regarding tuberculosis.
That's right, Vincent. Researchers at Stanford University in California have created what they say is a highly accurate blood test that could easily diagnose and sort out those who have latent tuberculosis from those who have active TB. The blood test identifies 3 genes that respond in a consistent pattern when the disease becomes active. In a study published in the journal Lancet Respiratory Medicine, the Stanford scientists report the results of the test in 1,400 blood samples. The test correctly diagnosed 86% of samples from children with active TB, and the test was accurate in 99% of cases where there was no active disease. Each year, 9.6 million people become infected with tuberculosis, and 1.5 million of them die. Now, health workers fear a skin disease caused by bacteria and transmitted through sneezing and coughing is resurfacing in Malawi. This health center in Balaka, eastern Malawi, has taken in more than 20 people shunned by their communities because they have leprosy. It is a chronic infectious disease causing disfiguring skin ulcers and nerve damage in the arms and legs. 37-year-old Julius Muzeni was diagnosed with the disease last year.
People in the village used to stay away from me. They did not want me to associate with them, not even to come close to them. I was mostly alone. My hope is to receive the best treatment and get better. But if it fails, then I think I will die.
Leprosy is one of the world's oldest known diseases. Globally, the number of cases has plummeted from 5.2 million in 1985 to about 210,000 a year now. It still exists in more than 100 countries. Malawi was declared leprosy-free in 1970. However, more than 600 cases were reported in 2015, up from 554 in 2014. Health workers are urging people to report suspected cases.
We thoroughly screen our patients for leprosy. We are good at detecting any cases of skin problems, whether they are mere skin problems or leprosy. When we detect leprosy, we immediately put the patient on treatment.
Because the disease carries a stigma going back centuries, many sufferers are afraid to come forward for help. The poorest and most marginalized communities are most vulnerable. People who develop disabilities from leprosy are often excluded from their families and their work. George Anafi, a leprosy coordinator in Balaka district, raises some concern.
We are still in a situation where leprosy is still a problem. That's what it means. And even the number of new cases that are coming in every year is also alarming. Door-to-door contact survey, well, that's part of surveillance. This is where we are looking to. But, we are handicapped in terms of resources.
Leprosy can only be diagnosed once visible symptoms appear, and this can take up to 20 years. The disease is spread through droplets from the nose and mouth after frequent contact with a sufferer. Malawi government says the cases being reported as new infections are actually old cases and has called for calm. Leprosy is curable with a combination of drugs. Joining us now live via Skype from Durban, South Africa, is Peter Labsher, Executive Director of the Leprosy Mission in Southern Africa. Mr. Labsher, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be joining you.
So how concerned should we be with what's happening in Malawi? What is your reaction to this?
I wouldn't be too concerned. Obviously, we would like leprosy numbers to drop to the point where they reach zero. But I think a number of factors are at play here. First of all, we've seen an increase in the detection rate of 13% from the year 2014 to the year 2015 in Malawi. Now, that is a significant increase, but as one of the people pointed out in the interview, which is just being broadcast, many of those folk could have had leprosy or have developed leprosy a long time ago, and it's only now that they have been diagnosed with the disease. So the fact that there has been a 13% increase in the number of people detected or diagnosed during the period doesn't necessarily mean that there's been a 13% increase in the number of people contracting leprosy. It just means that some people have come forward for diagnosis who may previously have been hit from diagnosis. And as we heard during the interview, one of the problems with leprosy is the stigma surrounding it.
Yes.
And that's a huge problem in many countries. And for that reason, people may not come forward for diagnosis when the early signs appear.
But Mr. Lapsher, some people you speak with are even surprised that this ancient disease is still around. So what is the issue? What are some of the issues that are making this still not being eradicated, given that tremendously it has been curbed?
Well, as one of the people in your interview pointed out, leprosy has a very long incubation period. So it's possible to be infected today by the leprosy bacillus, but only to develop outward signs of the disease 10 years from now, or even 15 years from now. So that does make the management of the disease quite problematic in that you've got to keep eyes on contacts of known leprosy patients for a very long time before you can be certain that leprosy has died out in a certain area. Leprosy, unfortunately, also goes in partnership with issues like poverty. So where one finds poverty, malnutrition, and so on, one finds leprosy as well. And of course, it's in those conditions that often health services are not as good and strong as they could be, and that makes bringing treatment or getting treatment to people that much more difficult.
And speaking of treatment, is it being offered free of charge, given that poverty is definitely a factor there?
Absolutely. Leprosy treatment has been made available free of charge for many, many years. The World Health Organization, in partnership with the Novartis Foundation in Switzerland, makes available the multi-drug therapy which we use to treat leprosy, and has done so for a very long time. So those of us running leprosy programs, we have to place an order each year with WHO. We let them know how many new patients have been diagnosed, and they supply treatment accordingly. So leprosy programs all around the world have access to free treatment.
How long is the treatment course? And tell us quickly what the situation is in South Africa.
Leprosy treatment lasts for about 2 years, although there are some patients who may need treatment for a little bit longer than that to be absolutely sure that they've been cured of the disease. South Africa, as in keeping with many other countries in Southern Africa, has seen a steady decline in the number of new people developing leprosy every year. And we now diagnose about 80 new patients a year. And some of those folk are not South Africans, they're patients who come to us from abroad. So the number of internal leprosy patients in South Africa has dropped to about 50. And that, of course, is a very low number. We're delighted with it. One of the issues, though, to bear in mind is that leprosy is a chronic illness. And people that had leprosy many years ago and who've been cured of the active disease, unfortunately still suffer from the effects of the disease, particularly loss of sensation in their hands, feet, and eyes. And this means that they're very vulnerable to developing disabilities. And that, for us in the leprosy mission, is a big issue.
Okay, Mr. Lapsher, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And that was Peter Lapsher, Executive Director of the Leprosy Mission in Southern Africa. And that's our Africa Health Report for today. Vincent?
Well, thanks, and be sure to watch Leno Madu's Health Reports every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. It's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, a joyful celebration of Black History Month. We'll be right back.
tubamenyeshe yuko abarundi tunezerewe ko twakiriye umushyitsi w'iteka.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. We begin with a clip that has taken over social media. Virginia McLaurin waited all her life to see an African American in the White House. So when she finally got a chance to meet President Barack Obama, the 106-year-old woman couldn't contain her excitement. McLaurin was visiting the White House for Black History Month when President Obama asks if McLaurin wanted to meet the First Lady, and the answer is an obvious one. As she rushes over, Obama, who appears amused, says, "Slow down now, don't go too quick." McLaurin was so excited she broke out into a dance, and the Obamas joined in. Well, next up, a Lebanese startup is offering online shoppers the chance to buy luxury brands at reduced prices. The website, based in Beirut, sells high-end clothing and electronics, as well as travel and entertainment packages. Bid Affairs features an online bidding system where users pre-purchase a number of bids and use their quota to bid for an item. If a user wins the item, they pay the discounted final price, with all bids placed in an auction being non-refundable. The founders say they started working on importing the idea present in the United States and Australia to the Middle East around 3 years ago. Well, and finally, startups and smaller companies are touting their newest devices at Showstoppers, a trend-setting curtain raiser event in Spain. One hot ticket item is a smartphone which boasts a built-in thermal imaging camera. It's claimed to be a world first in a smartphone and intended for builders, electricians, and emergency and utility workers. According to experts, the top tech trend at this year's event is not smartphones themselves, but what they are now enabling people to do. One example is a new Genius electronic toothbrush, which combines motion sensor technology and video recognition via a smartphone's camera to track the areas of the mouth being brushed. And that is what is trending, and that's our show for today. Have a good night.
Welcome to the Voice of America's Newswords.
Speaking to U.S. senators, CIA Director John Brennan had to answer many questions when he was nominated for the job.
Democrats repeatedly questioned Brennan about the U.S. government's use of armed, unmanned aircraft, known as drones.
Drones are planes flown by people in another location. They have been used by the United States against terrorists in places that are difficult for soldiers to reach.
Americans are debating how drones should be used.
Now, the next time you hear the word drone,
drone.
Your English will be good enough to know what this newsword means.